Welcome to the National Press Foundation. We're coming to you from the Evelyn Y. Davis Studios via Zoom. I'm Chris Adams, Director of Training for NPF. Today, we're continuing our series on poverty and inequality in the United States and how COVID-19 has amplified it. Today's topic, food insecurity, with USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack. We're thankful for our sponsors, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and the Heising Simons Foundation. This series of briefings is accompanied by a slate of awards for the best reporting on the subject. The next award will be for stories published by March 31st, radio, TV, or print. NPF also has upcoming awards on mental health reporting and on energy and environment reporting. Deadlines are Friday. Details are all at nationalpress.org. And on our website, you can also see video from our recent awards extravaganza. Hear the speeches and a panel discussion with winners such as Dr. Sanjay Gupta of CNN, columnist George Will, and NPR's Audie Cornish. And finally, note about an upcoming program, a continuation of our 10-part series on global trade with a look at disruptions in medical supply chains. Among our guests will be Martha Mendoza, a two-time Pulitzer Prize winner for the Associated Press, who has done groundbreaking reporting on the issue. Today, we're thrilled to have with us U.S. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack to talk about the U.S. Department of Agriculture's pivotal role in easing food insecurity in the United States. Secretary Vilsack is on his second stint in the job. He also served as Ag Secretary for the duration of the Obama administration. He comes from the great state of Iowa, a little hometown bias from a fellow Iowan, and he also has experience on the state and local level, serving as governor of Iowa, a state senator, and as mayor of Mount Pleasant. We have Secretary Vilsack until 1 p.m. Eastern. At that time, we'll bring on three experts to talk about what they are seeing nationally and locally on food insecurity and on how reporters can cover the issue. We'll have Vince Hall of Feeding America, Calvin Moore of Meals on Wheels of Metro Tulsa, and Laura Riley of the Washington Post. We'll hear from each of the panelists, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. You can raise your Zoom hand, and we'll give you the microphone over to you for an audio question, or put a question into the Q&A text function. And please tweet today at #NPFPoverty. So welcome all, and welcome Secretary Vilsack. Thank you very much for taking the time to come explain this important issue. We have a room full of journalists and so we're trying to get a sense from you about the scope of the problem and the scope of the issue right now and what they can do to address and write about the topic. So welcome.
Chris, thanks very much. And it's certainly an honor to be with everybody today. This is an incredibly important topic, and I'm going to take the liberty of, as speaker, expanding the topic just a bit. It's very easy to talk in this country about food insecurity in the sense that there are 43 million Americans that are currently receiving the benefits of the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And that's one way of discussing the issue of food insecurity in the country. But I think there's a much larger problem that we have to confront, which is not only food insecurity, but also nutrition insecurity. When you consider that 60% of American adults have one chronic disease, 40% of us have two or more chronic diseases, and diet is directly connected to many of those chronic diseases. When you look at the fact that we have a significantly high rate of obesity among our children, which poses a potential national security concern for admirals and generals who are trying to figure out where the all-volunteer military is going to come from, when 75% of our children ages 17 to 24 are not fit for military service, you can see that this is a very large problem that we have to address. And I think it's incumbent upon the Department of Agriculture, working in concert with the food and agricultural industry, to begin the process of transforming our food system so that we address not only the issue of food insecurity, but also nutrition insecurity. The fact is that we spend $160 billion as a government, federal government, through Medicaid and Medicare on diabetes, which is significantly greater than the entire budget of the Department of Agriculture. And much of that diabetes issue is directly connected to the issue of food nutrition and food insecurity and nutrition insecurity. So I hope that you'll permit me in talking about what the Department of Agriculture is going to do in both of these spaces, as the direction from the President and Vice President has been for us to focus on these issues. I think first and foremost, we obviously have to modernize our nutrition security and food security system and our assistance programs. Now, what does that mean? It means significantly expanding access and participation in the programs. The fact is, our WIC program, nearly 50% of those who are eligible for WIC are currently not participating in WIC. And the reality is that many states don't necessarily do the job of educating people in the SNAP program about the benefits of SNAP and the availability of SNAP. And the result is that oftentimes states underperform in terms of access to this important program. We need to make sure that the benefits that are provided in these programs are meaningful. I think the reality is that the benefit, Congress has seen fit to recently increase the SNAP benefit by 15% and to extend that benefit at the request of the President and Vice President in the recent American Rescue Plan, is an indication that we have some work to do in terms of the appropriateness, the level of benefits that are currently received by families who are financially struggling. I think we need to figure out ways in which we can make the utilization of those benefits more convenient. Currently, a number of appropriations have been made recently to the department to take a look at how we might be able to facilitate online utilization of the SNAP program, for example. Are there ways in which we can create more vehicles, creative vehicles, for the utilization of SNAP benefits that provide a more convenient outlet, especially for those who may be finding it difficult to locate a full-scale grocery store in their neighborhood? And obviously, system integrity becomes important. The importance of being able to say to those who appropriate the money that we are spending it wisely and well. So that's one goal. The second goal is to expand the availability and consumption of healthier and more nutritious food for our children, for families that are financially stressed, and for socially disadvantaged individuals. We know that disproportionately the issue of food security and nutrition insecurity bear more heavily on people of color. Oftentimes they find themselves in remote rural areas or in areas in urban centers that are not serviced by full-scale grocery stores. And the Department of Agriculture, I think, has a responsibility not only to improve the nutrition that youngsters receive at school, where often they receive 1, 2, and sometimes 3 meals from the school setting, as well as making sure that we do what we can to encourage the food and agricultural industry to extend access to nutritious food. Third, I think it's important for us to do a better job of educating consumers across the board about healthy choices that they can make. The dietary guidelines, My Plate, and other methods to utilize ways in which we can get information out to people so that as they are making choices, food choices, whether in the home or outside the home, they make the healthy choice. And finally, we've learned a lot from this pandemic. And what we've learned in part is the need for our system, our food system, to be able to transition more quickly from 50% of our food being consumed at food service operations to the need when food service operations are disrupted to quickly shift to our food assistance programs. That means making sure that our food banks, our pantries are well equipped to be able to handle a surge, are well equipped to be able to store and to refrigerate perishable items so that we have an opportunity to make the shift so that we don't see what we saw in this pandemic, which was the destruction of food, the dumping of food. So these are 4 major goals that we will be working on at USDA over the course of the next 4 years in the Biden-Harris administration. We've already begun that work, especially in the context of COVID relief. We've increased the SNAP benefit by 15%, and we intend to extend that increase upon the passage of the American Rescue Act. We've increased the pandemic EBT. That's the program that's providing assistance to families whose children are not currently in school because schools are shut down. Those children would normally get 1 or 2 meals at that location. Now the parents have to assume the burden. We're now providing a benefit to those families and increasing that benefit and making it available for children under the age of 6. I think it's important. You asked what journalists can do. One thing we can do is to encourage states to provide the plan by which they will be implementing the pandemic EBT benefit, and understand that it also extends to childcare facilities. This is a way of addressing the food insecurity issue among financially stressed families by making sure that the childcare facilities, if it's open, that the parents have the ability to utilize EBT if the childcare facility that they normally use is not available. Currently, 21 states have approved their plans for the use of EBT. We've provided quicker and more easy guidance for states to qualify. 15 plans are currently being reviewed by the department, which means that we still have 14 states that have yet to submit a plan. I would encourage them to do so. We're going to continue to see investments in terms of the technology that will provide additional utilization of online utilization of these benefits. And we're going to continue the food box program that was started in the previous administration through April. We are going to do a review of that program to determine how best to coordinate the benefits of that program as it services rural and remote areas with the important work that's being done by those who receive the benefits of our TFAP program. How can we make sure that both of those efforts are operating in the best possible way with utilization of resources in the most efficient way? Let me just briefly talk about the American Rescue Plan, and then I'll be happy to take questions. That plan also provides for an expansion and an extension of the SNAP benefit for a number of months through the summer. It creates a significant opportunity for us in WIC with an innovation fund that is focused on trying to figure out why only 50% of those who qualify for that program are currently participating in that program. It increases potentially the voucher in the program as well to make it more attractive. It extends the pandemic EBT effort to and through September. It increases investments in online purchasing, and it provides additional resources under TFAP, which will allow us the opportunity to continue to provide assistance and help to food banks and pantries throughout the United States who have just done an incredible job during this pandemic, but have been stressed almost beyond their capacity and capability. And it will provide, I think, assistance and help for our schools as they begin to adjust to whatever the new normal will be once we get on the other side of this pandemic, assuming more and more people in the United States are vaccinated and we get to herd immunity. So we're looking forward to aggressively utilizing these resources to fulfill the goals that I've outlined. But there will be a lot more work to be done over the course of the next 4 years to improve the system, to make it more equitable, to make sure that it's providing opportunities for nutritious and healthy choices, and to address both food insecurity and nutrition insecurity. Let me stop there. Be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much, there. So for the audience out there, you can submit a question in the Q&A text, excuse me, the Q&A text chat function down at the bottom of your screen. You can also raise your hand, and we'll have some audio questions that way. So we have some questions coming in. I have some questions for you also. I was hoping just for those of you, for the people in the audience who aren't steeped in USDA and USDA food programs, I was hoping you could just give us a quick sense of kind of the scope of them within USDA and within the USDA budget. Alyssa, our producer, could you pull up slide 16? This is just showing the breakdown of the USDA outlays, and basically it's just indicating the amount of the full scope of your budget that is dedicated to these programs. 16, Alyssa. Yeah. So I was hoping you could just give us a sense of all the money you're spending, of all that nutrition assistance program money. What are the main programs? You talked about WIC and SNAP. Could you just give us just a general kind of ballpark breakdown of them?
Well, SNAP obviously is the largest of the nutrition programs and provides, as I said, assistance and help today to 43 million Americans, a number of them, unfortunately and tragically, children who are living in food insecure and nutrition insecure homes. In addition to that, we also operate the Women and Infant Children Program, which is designed to provide healthy foods for pregnant women and young moms and young children. That's a program that has been incredibly effective, except that, as I said earlier, we have some challenges in terms of access and making sure that people who qualify for that program take full advantage of that program, especially among minority moms. There seems to be the need for us to do a better job of outreach in those minority communities to make sure that they understand the availability of that program. The school lunch and school breakfast programs are also programs that USDA helps to administer, where we provide resources to schools to make sure that they provide healthy meals, both at breakfast and at lunch. We have a number of programs during the summer feeding program that recognizes that while kids are in school under normal circumstances 180 days out of the year, that means they're not in school on weekends and during the summer. And so we are in the process of providing assistance and help to create summer feeding sites, to encourage weekend packages for backpacks for kids so that they continue to have nutritious meals. I mean, this is incredibly important to their ability to learn well. So this is an important investment in our future. We also have programs to provide help and assistance for seniors who are living in assisted living facilities. We have programs, smaller programs for childcare centers as well. We also have ways in which we are providing assistance and help to expand incentives for those who are receiving assistance, SNAP benefits, for example, to be able to utilize them at farmers markets, to be able to be incented, perhaps encourage them to extend their SNAP benefits by the Gus Schumacher program that basically provides incentives for the purchase of fruits and vegetables. So there are a wide variety of programs. We also work with Indian tribes through a Indian tribal food program, which we continue to work on improving. The territories are also part of our responsibility. That's why we're excited about the American Rescue Plan, which will provide additional benefits for Puerto Rico and the American territories. So a lot of significant reach, if you will, in addition to the dietary guidelines, in addition to some of the marketing efforts of encouraging people to understand what a healthy diet looks like.
Okay, and since you were in office from 2009 to 2000 and the end of 16 or the start of 17, you're back now. I mean, the structure that you just outlined, how much has that changed? I mean, big picture, are there significant changes in the way the food assistance is delivered from when you were there the first time to where things are now?
I don't know that there's been a significant change. I think there's obviously more attention during the pandemic to ways in which we can provide online opportunities. Obviously, the pandemic PBT effort, I think, is new because of the pandemic, because of the disruption that the pandemic caused in schools. So I pointed out, when your child eats at school, the school gets the benefit of a quantity discount, if you will. They buy food, obviously, in bulk. So they're able to provide a decent meal. I think it needs to be improved, but we'll be working on that for a reimbursement that the federal government provides. Well, when school's not in session, mom and dad have to incur that expense. And so the pandemic EBT is designed to provide them resources to do that. And recently we increased the level of benefit because parents, unfortunately, don't get the benefit of a quantity discount the way schools do. So we tried to get parents in roughly the same financial circumstance they would be if their children were still in school.
Okay, so we have plenty of questions coming in. I have some more questions, but we're going to turn the microphone over now to Christopher Waljasper from Reuters. If you could unmute, Jeff, if you can unmute Chris. We are trying. Okay, here it goes. Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
And Chris is a former NPF fellow, so welcome back, Christopher.
Very good.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, as well. I want to ask, you mentioned that the food box program last year was beneficial, especially for rural communities. I'm curious, though, looking at the data from that program, a large portion of counties across the country and often in rural areas received food boxes 3 months or fewer. Something like half of counties across the country. So can you talk to me about, some of the things you're hoping to do with this program to make sure a more equitable distribution of boxes takes place and it really gets to everywhere that needs it and not just the places where vendors choose to distribute?
Well, I think what I said was rural, remote areas. There's a difference.
Fair.
The food box program basically provided in those rural, remote areas access to food that individuals may not have gotten. And I think that is a benefit from the program. But we recognize at USDA that there are some concerns and some questions about the distribution and about the cost of distribution. There was an unequal cost associated with the distribution and filling of these boxes. Some people made a significant percentage from filling the boxes, others made a less of a percentage. So that's why with some additional resources that were left over from the previous administration, we decided to continue the program for another couple of months. But as we are continuing the program, we are evaluating the program, taking a look at the issue that you've raised and a number of other issues to determine if we were to continue something akin to a food box program on potentially a smaller scale or a more targeted scale, a more focused scale, or a different scale. How do we do it? What would we do? How do we preserve what may have worked with that program? And how do we assure that the resources that would otherwise go into a food box program could be redirected, perhaps under the sort of the TFAP distribution system, to more effectively provide assistance and help to more people? I don't think any decisions have been made yet because we haven't done the evaluation. But I think it does make sense for us to evaluate the program. It does make sense, if we can, to preserve what works under the program. And it does make sense to figure out ways in which we can use a highly efficient distribution system that exists today, the TFAP distribution system. How can we use that more effectively? And I would say we also need, as part of that evaluation and discussion, to continue to look for ways in which we can eliminate, in the face of major disruptions, the disincentive that there is to provide product to that distribution system. We saw milk dumped, we saw crops destroyed, in large part because there is a financial cost associated with processing food and getting it delivered to a food bank. And until we can figure out how to eliminate that financial disincentive, it makes it more difficult for people to make the decision to donate and to make that shift from food service to food assistance. So as we evaluate these programs, I think we have to take a look at how best can we deal with this. We hadn't dealt with this before because the disruptions that have occurred in our food systems before were local or regional disruptions. There was a hurricane, there was a flood, there was a natural disaster of some sort that impacted and affected a town or a state or maybe even a region of the country. But we hadn't had anything that completely disrupted the entire national system. So we've got to learn from this process, and we've got to make our system more resilient. I think that means as well investing in the infrastructure in that distribution system that will enable us to do a better job of providing perishable items that in turn can be made available to folks. It also means finding creative ways to utilize restaurants and other organizations that are adversely affected by a major disruption. How can we continue to utilize the workforce or the equipment or the location to provide access to decent food? I mean, I think we have to be very creative about this.
So next question we have, I think you touched on this a second ago, but so apologies. This question is from Megan Boynton with Bloomberg Government. Are there plans in works to extend the Farmers to Families food box program past April? And you talked about this a bit, but what changes do you intend to make to the initiative?
Well, we're still in the process of evaluating and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, what was good about the program and what needs to be changed about the program. No decision has been made as to whether or not it will be extended, and if extended, what it will look like. I think at the end of the day, what I'm hopeful we'll be able to do is to figure out how we can continue to provide access to healthy, nutritious foods in all parts of the country, not just in those that are served by a great food bank, or not those are necessarily served by a decent grocery store where people can redeem their SNAP benefits, but by those remote areas that, because of the food box program, for the first time had access to perishable items that they might not have otherwise had access to. How do we preserve that capacity? Because that addresses not just food security, but it also addresses nutrition security. And I think it's really important that we begin to have a very concerted effort to change the discussion about this away from just simply focusing on hunger, but recognizing that we also have a nutrition challenge, and we need to solve both of them.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit more about, I mean, you mentioned that, talk to me a little bit more about the, new food nutrition assistance, about calories versus nutrition. In general, are the foods that people are getting through your programs, through USDA programs, are those foods that they should be getting? And is there a way that you can change the kind of the composition of the diet that people have access to?
I think there's more work to be done. I think we started a process with the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act a number of years ago to improve the quality and nutritional value of foods that are served to children in schools, in the school lunch program and school breakfast program. I think that work needs to continue. I think we've probably taken a step or two back on that. I think we need to take a step or two forward in the near term. And in the long term, I think we need to make sure that we have the resources to enable schools to do the job that needs to be done, which is to provide nutritious options for kids. You know, in agriculture, we talk about precision agriculture, which is basically understanding that every acre of ground needs to be treated separately and differently, if you will, in terms of inputs. Some acres need more nutrients, some acres need less. I think the same kind of concept needs to be applied when we think about nutrition. I think we're going to learn a lot more about our genetic makeups over the course of the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And as we learn, we're going to learn that there are going to be specific diets that are more designed for people with condition A than condition B. And I think we at USDA need to be thinking about our food programs in that context. How can we create the capacity of these food programs over time to provide that precise and precision nutrition that meets the specific needs of the individuals who are receiving assistance? That's a huge problem, a huge challenge, but I think it's worth undertaking because of the costs associated with not doing it well. And I alluded to earlier to just diabetes alone, $160 billion and that's just the federal government's share of diabetes. That's not the private sector, private medical insurance share of diabetes. And a lot of that is diet related. And a lot of it impacts and affects, unfortunately, disproportionately people of color. So if we're concerned about a equity lens, if we're concerned about nutrition, if we're concerned about healthcare costs, if we're concerned about worker productivity, if we're concerned about our kids doing well in school, we should be concerned about food insecurity and nutrition insecurity.
Okay. And are there, since this is an issue that you've needed to tackle for a while, are there some states that are attempting to pay more attention to the to nutrition security? Is there a laboratory of ideas out there that you can figure out what works?
Well, there are states, obviously, that do a particularly good job. I mean, but the reality is that you need to figure out ways. Take the SNAP program. We started that effort by trying to figure out how can we make SNAP recipients, how can we allow them the opportunity not only to shop at a grocery store, but also to shop at a farmer's market. So that involved basically expanding the infrastructure that would allow farmers markets across the country to be able to accept SNAP benefits. All right, that's a good first step. Then the question is, well, when a person goes into the grocery store and they utilize their SNAP card, are there ways in which we can encourage them to purchase fruits and vegetables, for example, that they might not otherwise purchase? Well, one way you do that is by basically stretching the effect or the impact of that SNAP dollar by saying, if you buy a certain product under a grant program that we have, you will get an extra $1 or $2 on your SNAP card, or your SNAP card will only be charged 50 cents instead of $1, which means that you can expand that SNAP benefit a bit by purchasing the right things. There are ways in which we can, I think, look at the Wic program, and to the extent that 50% of those who aren't currently taking advantage of that program, we need to get those people on board. Why? Because a Wic program provides an opportunity for people to experience fruits and vegetables and healthy foods that they might not otherwise purchase. So, I mean, there are a variety of ways to do this, and there are more ways, I'm sure, than I know. But the key here is you aren't going to think about this. You're not going to create it at the same level of importance until you recognize that we're dealing with twin issues here. It's hunger, but it's also nutrition and security. Once you get that, your mindset focused on those two challenges, then you can address both challenges simultaneously. I think in the past, we've sort of looked at hunger over here and nutrition over there. And we've had programs for hunger, we've had programs, but we haven't married them. And I think it's important to do that.
Okay. So moving on to some other questions. This one is from Myra Acevedo of WIPR TV in Puerto Rico. What factors are keeping folks from requesting SNAP benefits?
Well, the SNAP programs are administered by the states. While I have not had the opportunity to see the statistics currently, I can tell you that when I was secretary before, I asked for participation rates in the respective states, expecting and anticipating that the participation rates would be pretty standard among states. What I found was that some states had an 80 or 85% participation rate, and some states had a 50% participation rate. So the question is, well, why does some state have an 85% rate and one state has a 50% rate? Well, it has to do with governors. It has to do with the state government. It has to do with whether or not they do a particularly good job of using the monies that are provided by the federal government to make sure that people know that they're entitled to receive the SNAP benefit. Some states do a better job of promoting the availability of that program than others. Secondly, there are states that don't fully utilize all the employment and training resources that are provided, so that they are sort of limiting the ability of folks in their states to understand what the benefit is and how the benefit can be obtained. And there were states, I think, that didn't look for ways to ease participation. If you, for example, if you have a person coming in for Medicaid, and you have a state that basically, in a sense, separates Medicaid benefits from SNAP benefits, and the people that are in charge of Medicaid aren't really fully aware of what SNAP's all about, and SNAP's not aware of Medicaid, you essentially can not basically promote the comprehensive nature of assistance for people. So what you want is a situation where people, when they walk in and get apply for SNAP benefits, they automatically apply for and automatically qualify for other programs, and vice versa. If they qualify for Medicaid, pretty doggone likely they're going to qualify for SNAP. So why not create systems and mechanisms by which you don't have to have multiple ways of applying for benefits, that you have a sort of a single portal. And then finally, there is a percentage of the SNAP beneficiaries that are senior citizens. And if there is a group of people that are underutilizing SNAP, it's probably seniors. And I think part of it is because they see SNAP as welfare, and they're proud people. But this is not welfare. This is for all of our benefits, because we know that SNAP benefits reduce poverty levels. We know from research that utilization of SNAP helps to improve health outcomes. And so to the extent we all benefit when we have nutrition security and food security among all of our people. We need to make sure that people understand that getting a SNAP benefit isn't necessarily, it's not welfare. It's not something that you should feel badly about. It's something that is being provided because it's in our collective best interest for people to be well fed.
Okay, continuing on that theme, Alyssa, if you could pull up slide 17, I want to ask a question about a very targeted group, college students. This is from a GAO looked at this issue a couple of years ago, and basically they discovered what you were just talking about, that there are plenty of people who qualify, college age students who qualify for SNAP, who aren't getting it. In the pie chart on the right, you can see that 57% of students who are potentially eligible students reported not receiving SNAP, and only 43% who were eligible were getting it. So I was hoping you could maybe talk, I know that's just one of the many kind of populations you deal with, but is there anything that can be done for those college age students, or are they any different than kind of the broad SNAP audience?
Well, in the COVID relief packages that have been passed, there is additional assistance and help and greater flexibilities to enable students to participate in SNAP. So hopefully those flexibilities that have been provided in the COVID legislation will inform us as to how best to handle this once we get on the other side of COVID. And I think it's instructive and important whenever you're faced with a crisis like this, that you not only deal with the crisis, you not only deal with trying to get to a new normal, but that you also recognize what worked during that could potentially be applied longer term. So that's one area. The other area is increased benefits. The reality is that part of what we're doing at USDA is not only increasing benefits today, but we are now taking a look at the foundational calculation that currently supports the SNAP benefit structure. It's called the Thrifty Food Plan, and it is a calculation that is in theory based on what an average American family was struggling financially. What would a thrifty food plan for that family look like? I can tell you that it hasn't really been examined and evaluated carefully and comprehensively for a considerable period of time. And some of the assumptions that form the basis of the calculation clearly are not what is happening in American families today. For example, I may be slightly wrong on the amount of time, but I think I'm pretty close. There is the assumption that the average American family spends well over an hour to an hour and a half preparing food from scratch. Well, I don't think that's true today. I think we're in a society that slips it in the microwave, it's ready to eat kind of thing. So those assumptions, I think, if they're wrong, then the benefit calculation is obviously not what it needs to be. And I think we as we look at this increase, it's well enough to increase it for 3 months or 6 months or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think USDA has to make the case that based on the average American family today, based on the way the world is today, the benefit that we have I think this is going to be borne out. The benefit we're providing today may not be as meaningful as it needs to be. And so, but it bears evaluation, it bears review, it bears being able to convince the policymakers in the country that the foundation upon which this program is based needs to be evaluated. And based on that evaluation, if it's fair and reasonable, it's going to show what it's going to show. And then we have to make whatever adjustments it calls for.
Okay, so we've talked about different populations. You talked a bit ago about the elderly. I asked you a question about college students. We talked about school children. Are there other kind of subpopulation groups that you're concerned about and that you're trying to find a way to reach?
Well, children under 6, a good example. Two examples. One, when we looked at the pandemic EBT, and with congressional direction, it wasn't just school age kids. It was as importantly the kids from 0 to 6, because if they are in preschool or they're in childcare facilities, these are incredibly important periods of time in their life when they've got to have good nutrition. And if mom and dad are not able to provide that good nutrition and have been relying on the childcare center or the preschool or whatever, we need to make sure that those families are provided help and assistance. So extending the pandemic EBT to children under 6 and making sure that governors, as they're submitting their plans for the implementation of this plan, of this program, that they not only focus on schools, but they also focus on this population 0 to 6. And then I keep hitting on this, but I think it's important. 50% of WIC beneficiaries don't take advantage of WIC. Well, who are those 50%? It's women, infants, and children. So again, that is an incredibly important subset where we really have to focus, because if kids start off well, if they get the proper nutrition, if they get access, begin to learn at a very early age the opportunities for nutritious, delicious food that involves fruits and vegetables and whole grains and so forth, then over time they become consumers of those products. But if we don't provide that help and assistance, then they may go down a different path. And the fact that we have a disproportionate number of kids, a high percentage of our kids who are obese, and 72% of our total adult population is overweight or obese, that's not good for the country. I mean, that's just not good for the country. So we have got to address this. And I think you address it by linking food security and nutrition security together.
Okay, so let me go to a question from Lisa Held of Civil Eat. USDA under the last administration rolled back many of the changes made to nutrition standards for school meals. With this increased emphasis on nutrition security, do you plan on reinstating those standards that were originally set as a result of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act?
Well, I think there's no question that over the next 4 years, we're going to continue to see an effort to improve the nutrition in school meals and in efforts throughout our entire food assistance programming. I think it's important. I think it's necessary. I think obviously we're dealing in a crisis situation, so first and foremost, we have to make sure we get through that. We get through that with providing understanding of how difficult it might be. Their supply chains might be disrupted. It might be difficult. But at the end of the day, we're going to continue to press this issue. We were on the right track. We saw more and more acceptance of it over a period of time. We have to stay true to this if we're really serious about both food insecurity and nutrition insecurity.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question from Myra Acevedo from WIPR Puerto Rico. Are Hispanics equally underserved in these programs as other minorities?
Well, I think you can say that most, if not all, socially disadvantaged groups are underserved for a multitude of reasons. For example, in some of those states that I mentioned earlier, where the participation rate, my first stint as secretary, was in 50% or so, there was no effort whatsoever to educate people about the program in Spanish. Well, if you don't know English, how are you ever going to find out about the SNAP program? And if you are someone, if you're Hispanic or Latinx, are you trustful of the program? Do you think that maybe it's going to lead to something that's harmful to your family? So we have work to do, and states have work to do, and we're providing resources for the states to do that work. In fact, in the relief bills that have been provided, we recently made available $100 million of additional administrative expense to make it easier for states to do what they need to do in this time of crisis, to make sure that every person who qualifies for this program is able to access it. And that's regardless of where they live and regardless of who they are. But obviously, socially disadvantaged folks don't have as much access to information, perhaps, as others. And I think part of the challenge for states, and part of my encouraging governors to get engaged in this. I mean, I was a governor once. I don't know that all governors fully appreciate and understand the importance of this program to their state. You got 43 million Americans today. That's what, 11-12% of the population, roughly, that are food insecure. That's a pretty significant percentage. And if you don't have assistance and help for them to get through this tough time, it's not hard to understand why people who are hungry and unemployed wouldn't be satisfied with the status quo. I mean, part of the reason we have the level of stability and security in this country that we have had is in part because we have programs like SNAP that recognize that people need to be fed. And if we can also figure out that they need to be fed well, I think in the long run, we'll be better off.
Okay. So we got a question here from Jennifer Latsky, an editor at the High Plains Journal in Kansas. Mr. Secretary, do you anticipate our programs for farmers based not solely on yield and production, but on the nutritiousness of the crops or livestock produced?
I think the first order of business in terms of developing programs to help our farmers, ranchers, and producers is to make sure that we create new revenue sources and streams for those farmers, ranchers, and producers. When I said the food system needs to be transformed, I talked about the nutrition side of the house. Let me talk briefly about the ag side of the house. 90%, let's say actually 89.6% of farm families today in America do not make a majority of their living from farming. I challenged our staff to identify another profession, occupation, job, business, where 90% of the people participating in that occupation, profession, or job didn't make a majority of their money from their job or their occupation or their profession. Jason Hoffmeister said, YouTube gamers. Okay, setting them aside. What other occupation can you think of where 90% of the people who are working in it don't make a majority of what they make for a living from that job? You cannot say that the food system in this country is working when you've got that kind of statistic. So the question is, what do you do about it? Well, I think a solution, a direction is more markets, better markets, fairer markets, more open markets, stronger markets, new markets. And new markets is an opportunity to assist farmers in doing what they can do and are doing to be good stewards of the land and water, and in doing so, reduce significant emissions and provide a significant early win, if you will, in our efforts to mitigate and adapt to a changing climate. Farmers are prepared to do this. And if we can create markets and structures for them to receive financial benefits from doing it, you're going to see great wide-scale adoption. And America will lead the effort. President Biden and Vice President Harris have set a goal for American agriculture to be zero emissions by 2050. That is a goal that will create, to get to that goal, we've got to create new revenue streams, new income sources, so that we have not just one or two commodities that have to be sold on a world market where the price can be disrupted by tariffs or whatever, but where farmers and ranchers and producers have multiple income streams coming in, so that we begin to reduce that percentage of 89.6%.
Okay, so question from Helena Bodmiller-Evich from Politico, also a former NPF fellow. There's a growing criticism that school meals containing too much sugar and need limits. There's a growing criticism that school meals containing too much sugar and need limits, and therefore also has some piece. What are your plans for looking at the nutrition requirements for these programs? So,
well,
too much sugar.
Yeah, the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act was based on the 2015 dietary guideline, 2010 dietary guidelines. So now we have the 2020 dietary guidelines, and the question is, how can we adjust and make sure that whatever we're doing on the school meal side is consistent with those 2020 guidelines? That's first and foremost. And then secondly, are there ways in which we can encourage, incent, and adequately compensate schools to make sure that they're doing right by our children? I mean, it's not easy to be a school food service person. Pretty difficult. A lot of demands. And that's why part of what we did with the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act was to increase the reimbursement level for schools producing those meals. It's also why we had a school equipment program to try to give schools the ability to move away from one central kitchen, if you will, to allowing them and enabling them to produce food on site. And we need to continue to look for a multitude of ways, whether it's sugar, whether it's sodium or fat or whatever it might be. We need to look for a multitude of ways to make sure that we are providing a nutritious meal and a series of options for kids in schools, at school breakfast and school lunch, because it's in our best interest for kids to be well fed. It's in our best interest for them to be healthy, because they'll be better learners. And if they're better learners, they're going to be much better prepared for a very competitive world that they're going to grow up in.
Okay, so another question kind of on the same theme of the nutrition standards, a slightly different take on it. This is from Jackie Fatka of Farm Progress. Dealing with the nutrition standards that were rolled back in recent years, do you plan to take executive action to reverse back to what you first proposed during your last tenure? And what challenges, because of COVID and many students not being in a school, limit what can be offered to children?
Well, I think we're going to listen and learn. And I think we're going to obviously take a look at the way in which COVID demands and necessitates flexibility. But at the end of the day, I think we need to address this issue of nutrition insecurity. And that means basically taking a look at what the science tells us is the best way to approach this. You know, I talk to a lot of groups, and a lot of farm groups in particular, and they say to me, Mr. Secretary, we just want rules to be based on sound science in trade and in dealing with other countries. And I say, you're absolutely right. Rules should be based on sound science. Nutrition at schools should be based on sound science. And so at the end of the day, we know the science is telling us, and the science is going to be more and more precise as time goes on. As we get to know the genetic makeup of everyone, there's going to be greater and greater demands for greater precision and greater investment in nutrition. So we need to be ahead of this. We can't be years, decades behind. So we're going to do what we need to do to make sure that schools have the flexibility to get through this tough time. But we will be encouraging them to understand that they have, working with us, we have a collective responsibility to make sure that our kids are well fed. And there are barriers and difficulties and challenges. We just need to figure out how to get around through them, because at the end of the day, our kids' future depends on this. We cannot have the level of obesity. We cannot have the level of diabetes. We cannot have the level of chronic diseases that we have today. It will just literally cripple everything we're trying to do as a country.
Okay, so we have about 8 or 9 more minutes with the Secretary. We can get a few more questions in. This is from Mike Dorning from Bloomberg News. What do you think can be achieved by the end of the year on reducing hunger? What does success this year look like in terms of hunger in America?
Well, I think success, first and foremost, is making sure that those who qualify for SNAP are getting the benefits of SNAP and getting the benefits of the increase. So that means reaching out to governors and making sure governors are reaching out to their teams to say, hey, this is important to our people. We need to make sure we do everything we possibly can to get as many people who qualify for the program in the program and utilizing the program. I think secondly, it is about increasing and figuring out creative ways to increase into and to incent or do whatever we need to do to increase participation in WIC. Because that deals not only with food insecurity and hunger, but it also deals with the nutrition side of it, of the equation. I think it's, you know, I think we are challenged as we evaluate the Thrifty Food Plan to determine whether or not there needs to be any adjustments to make that benefit more meaningful. I think we're challenged to figure out ways in which we can make the use of those benefits more convenient. I think we're challenged to make sure that we continue to figure out ways in which people can be encouraged and incented to make healthier choices with their consuming dollar. I mean, there are just a multitude of ways that we have to act. And if we act, you know, what we should see at the end of all of this is we should see more people who qualified for the program participating. And as we improve the income, the income and employment opportunities in this country, and we get on the other side of COVID, we obviously will see probably a decrease in the number of people receiving SNAP. We should see an increase in WIC participation. We should see the utilization of the pandemic EBT, both in school, both for families who are dealing with school-age children, but also the 0 to 6. What lessons can be learned from that? As we review the food box program, are there ways in which we can deal with hunger issues more effectively and efficiently, utilizing the most effective distribution systems, but also recognizing that those distribution systems may not be effective in very remote areas? What do we need to do about improving opportunities in those remote areas? I think if we do all of that, we should see fewer hungry people, fewer insecure people, and begin the process of addressing nutrition security in a proactive way.
Okay, I have a couple more specific questions here, several dealing with the summer lunch program. The current waiver is set to expire at the end of June. Schools are hesitant to join the program until the waiver is extended for the rest of the summer. Is that on your to-do list?
we're right in the process now of evaluating what needs to be done in the face of COVID, in the face of what has existed. And I'm sure in the next week or two, we will provide the kind of direction and guidance that schools need to make decisions. We understand the importance of flexibility, and I certainly understand the need for us to continue through the summer months. And I think we'll come up with a program that will address the concerns that schools have and to do it in an appropriate way. But that's probably going to be in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. A follow-up question from Christopher Waljasper of Reuters. Do you foresee the loosened expanded SNAP benefits continuing after 2021 as food insecurity will likely continue for low-income Americans for years to come?
I'm not sure what the question means by loosened, but if he means about the increased benefits, I think it depends in part on what we learn from the Thrifty Food Plan evaluation, which will take some time. This is not a quick review. This is a thorough evaluation to give us a proper grounding for whatever decisions need to be made about the future of SNAP as it relates to the benefit levels. I think it's fair to say that Congress's appetite has been to increase this benefit, given the fact that we're still dealing with a significant amount of COVID. And I think it underscores the important role, particularly in rural areas, and particularly among socially disadvantaged groups and among the young, to understand the significance and importance of vaccinations. I mean, the reality is we still have too many Americans who don't think or don't want to or don't think they have to or are concerned because of risks that they think are inherent in any vaccine. We got too many people that are still hesitant, and we've got to break the barriers down to that hesitancy. We have to make sure people understand that to get on the other side, to open things totally back up with confidence, to get schools reopened with confidence, to allow us to go to a ball game, to do the things we did before COVID struck, we've got to get enough of us vaccinated. And the president, vice president are very clear. They want more people vaccinated. They want more opportunities to get vaccinated, and they want more vaccine to be administered. And they are working on all three of those efforts through the COVID task force.
Okay, and this will probably be the final question. But talk to me a little bit about the role of charitable organizations and then the role that they play. You were on the board of Feeding America until you became secretary again. We're hearing from Feeding America and Meals on Wheels, a local one of the local affiliates. How important are charitable organizations in helping ease and mitigate food insecurity? And can they play a bigger role? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I will tell you, I mentioned that the fact that we have security in part because we have nutrition assistance programs. It's fair to say that we also have security, more security than many countries do, because we have Feeding America and Meals on Wheels and other organizations that do similar work. The work of these organizations in this pandemic is nothing short of miraculous. I mean, just think about this. We saw a tremendous surge of demand at a time when the food system of this country wasn't able to quickly pivot from food service to food assistance, at a time when the very people working in those food banks were themselves victims of COVID. But yet we saw an incredible effort to supplement and complement the food assistance programs. I think in a perfect world, we wouldn't need Feeding America or Meals on Wheels, but we don't live in a perfect world. And the reality is that government can't do it all, nor probably should it do it all. So to the degree to which there's a partnership and a collaboration, I think it's incredibly important. So for example, I think one way, and I mentioned this earlier, I think one way the government can be a better partner with the Feeding Americas of the world is to say, well, what do we need to pivot more easily? Well, I think I suspect that one thing they would say is we need help with the infrastructure that would allow us to properly store and refrigerate, because we're just not equipped. I mean, it's great that you want to give us a gallon of milk, but we got no place to put it. And we can't guarantee that it's going to get taken up in an hour that, we shouldn't have to have what actually did have. We shouldn't have to have milk truck, tankers full of milk backed up to a Feeding America location or a food bank location, and essentially backing up because it has refrigeration capacity, but the food bank doesn't. And so you're distributing literally milk from a tanker. That's not the way we should do it here. The way we should do it is we should have programs that basically eliminate the disincentive for donation. And then we should have the capacity of a dairy industry or whatever to be able to pivot quickly and be able to deliver that quart of milk, a gallon of milk, whatever, to that food bank. And that food bank says, thank you very much. We've got a storage facility, we've got refrigeration capacity. And then over the course of the next 3, 4, 5 days, that milk is properly distributed to families that are just absolutely thrilled to have it. I can't remember precisely what the statistic is, but I think it's something along the lines that food banks provide maybe a couple of gallons of milk to families in need, when those families need over a year's period of time 50 to 60 gallons of milk.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be a better partner. And I'm hoping that with the resources that are provided in the various COVID relief bills and the American Rescue Plan, that we can be a better partner.
Okay, and with that, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you very much for giving us an hour of your time and for answering as many questions as we were able to get in. All our audience, stick around. We're going to hear from three panelists in 1 second. But Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you very much, and you've been very helpful and very informative for the journalist on the call here.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Everyone stay safe.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. And panelists Vince and Calvin and Laura, if you could all come to life. The folks we have with us now, Vince Hall, he is Interim Chief Government Relations Officer at Feeding America. And next slide, Calvin Moore is President and CEO of Meals on Wheels of Metro Tulsa. And he's also Vice Chair of Meals on Wheels America, their board of directors, the national outfit. And Laura Riley is Business of Food reporter at the Washington Post and also a former NPF fellow for our food and agriculture programs. So Laura and Calvin and Vince, thank you very much.
Jeff will have to start my video.
Okay, got it.
Chris.
Yeah, Jeff, if you could get Calvin's video started, or we could look at his dog for a while too. What's the dog's name, Calvin?
His name is Ty.
Ty, okay.
Staffordshire Terrier and half Labrador Retriever, about 75 pounds.
Okay. Well, so for the audience out there, we are just looking to have a good conversation for the next 25 or 30 minutes. And I'm going to start with some kind of general questions among our three panelists, but then if we have some more questions from the audience, we are looking forward to hearing from you all. I know that I wasn't able to get in all of the questions that you had posed to Secretary Vilsack and some of the very, what is Secretary Vilsack going to do questions. I don't think Calvin's going to be able to answer those, or Vince is going to be able to answer those, but we can talk to them about the kind of the general issues that they're seeing. But I want to start with Vince. Vince, you were with Feeding America. Can you just give us the brief overview of what Feeding America is and kind of what you all are seeing right now on the national level in terms of food insecurity and specifically how it has changed in the last year because of COVID?
Well, thank you, Chris. It's really an honor to be here today. I appreciate the invitation. Feeding America is a network of 200 member food banks who cover the entirety of the United States and Puerto Rico. But that's really just the first layer of what Feeding America's impact is, because we actually connect to a network of over 60,000 local faith-based and charitable organizations that help distribute food. And taken together, it is a very robust and impactful charitable food system that complements many of the government nutrition programs that the Secretary was discussing earlier. We are one of the largest nonprofit organizations in the United States of America, and we have received very generous support from the public pre-COVID, but especially in response to COVID, as people recognize that in addition to the health crisis created by the COVID pandemic, there is an economic crisis that has caused so many Americans to find themselves in need of food assistance. You know, I appreciate your asking because the definition of food insecurity is a stumbling block for some folks. And the reality is that many people experience hunger at various points of their day or their week. But food insecurity describes the circumstance in which people lack consistent access to healthy and nutritious food. This is a serious crisis in the United States. It has been escalated by the economics of COVID. We are used to doing disaster response efforts in response to hurricanes, wildfires, and other disaster issues. But what we have now is the equivalent of a 50-state hurricane, and it has been going on for almost a year. So we have been in disaster response mode for almost a year. This is really a perfect storm because it combines a triple whammy of significantly increased demand for food, declines in donations of food, and disruptions to the charitable food assistance system's operating model. Generally, demand spiked very significantly right at the outset of COVID, and then settled into what unfortunately has become a new normal, with demand being on average about 55% higher than the pre-pandemic levels. So significantly, a lot of the increased demand is people who have never previously sought assistance through the food assistance system. Our food banks are reporting an average of 40% of the new, of their current demand being generated by people who are seeking food assistance for the first time during the past year. And 64% of the food banks who facilitate SNAP applications report an average increase of 46% in SNAP applications. Feeding America, working with food growers, food manufacturers, distributors, producers, working with corporate partners, working with faith-based and charitable organizations at the ground level, have been able to generate 6 billion meals for Americans in need during this COVID crisis. And there are three main ways we get food. We rescue food from retail channels. We receive food through federal nutrition programs, and we also purchase food. Well, food purchasing is the most expensive of those options, but in order to meet the rising demand, that is up 88% over pre-pandemic levels, while donations of retail product are actually down to 31%. So we've had to deal with those issues. We've had to work and focus on keeping our people safe, on protecting the safety of those who come to food distributions. We've had to deploy drive-through lanes, and obviously mask requirements and social distancing to maximize the safety, not just of the volunteers and staff that provide the food, but for the public that is accessing the food. You know, final thought real quick, Chris, is that we don't have a food crisis in the United States. We throw away 40% of our food in this country. The amount of farmland we dedicate to growing the food we throw away is roughly the size of Pennsylvania. We have a food distribution crisis. We do not do a good job of getting this ample available resource that we have to the people who need it. And that is the heart of Feeding America's mission, is making this a country where no one is hungry. That our vision is an America where no one is hungry, and we're working every day in partnership with the government to build the charitable food system in partnership with an expansion of the government nutrition programs to achieve that goal.
Okay, so Calvin, I was hoping you could take us down to the local level. I mean, you are a board member nationally for Meals on Wheels, but you're the executive director in Tulsa's outfit. Could you give me a sense of what you have seen in Tulsa in terms of demand and need since COVID hit last year?
Yes, Chris, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being on as well. And I really appreciated Secretary Vilsack's comments on nutrition security. What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what we do at the national levels to support our 5,000 member organizations, and then kind of draw that down to what's going on at our local agency. You know, Meals on Wheels America is a leadership organization supporting more than 5,000 community-based programs across the country that are dedicated to addressing senior isolation and hunger. The network really worked around the clock to restructure its normally high-touch service model to safely address the dramatic increase in demand, all in the name of protecting homebound seniors from the threat of the pandemic, of course. Though through the COVID-19 response, the network really delivered 19 million additional meals to about 1 million additional seniors who were not previously accessing our services. And I think that's been talked about a little bit today. But really, we did it in the hopes of providing safety checks and other services needed to keep seniors safe and at home and out of nursing facilities and long-term care facilities, and God forbid, hospital emergency rooms, which I think is the real true value proposition of our Meals on Wheels network. If you really look at what was going on before the pandemic hit, we really had a lot of people who were living at the margins even before all of this started. So before the COVID-19 pandemic, 83% of low-income food insecure seniors were not receiving the meals that they needed. So even before it started, we really had a bigger problem than what we were really getting our hands around. If you look at it, 2.4 million seniors are really cared for by local organizations in the Meals on Wheels network. That number jumped by well over 1 million during the pandemic. We know that 9.77 million seniors are food insecure. So while we're really doing a great job at serving that 2.4 to 3.4 million, the number of individuals who really need our help is about 3 times that size. I think another note that I would make is that the pandemic really layered hardships onto seniors and others who were already struggling. We know that hunger and isolation, again, not only jeopardizes the health and well-being of older adults, they also place a significant strain on our country's healthcare system and economy. And to the Secretary's comments, I really believe, and we really believe at the network, that federally supported nutrition programs that are designed to meet the needs of older adults are really being significantly underfunded. So what our local programs have seen and reported across the country is that their numbers have really doubled during the pandemic. I can tell you that right here in Tulsa, in a normal year, we would serve about 3,000 seniors. This last year, we served well over 7,000 seniors. And as most of these organizations like ours are really expanding their mission to kind of meet some of these emerging needs, we did the same thing. So we focused on other populations. We have a Feed Our Future program that really focuses on high school kids who are struggling not with calorie intake, not necessarily with hunger. They're really overfed and undernourished. We saw that as an opportunity to really jump into the prevention game and start serving them early on, because we were realizing that we were really producing the senior clients of tomorrow. If we didn't take a strong stance on nutrition and try to do something to kind of mitigate that issue, we were really starting to produce really younger and younger clients who were going to be served by older and older volunteers. It's kind of a phenomenon that we were seeing and looking at and trying to figure out how could we address that. So it's been an interesting take. Again, like most programs, we rely on kind of a mixed bag of funding. Most of our funding comes from private donations. If you look at programs across the country, they really rely on 3 strands of funding. Title III, Older Americans Act, help from the United Way, and then a mixture of corporate, foundational, and individual funding for their programs. And we've seen significant increases in that type of support which is absolutely necessary to execute our mission.
Okay, so let me turn briefly to Laura. So looking at this as a journalist, Laura, I mean, from what the Secretary said and what Vince and Calvin have said, I mean, how do you go out and report and cover this as a reporter? How do you make a connection with your readers out there to describe food insecurity and, you know, find the good stories?
Well, so first of all, Chris, I was really heartened by a lot of what Secretary Vilsack said. You know, I think he was an ag secretary who focused a lot on public health in his previous, you know, go at this. And it's even more kind of salient right now. I mean, I think, you know, I'm talking to a bunch of journalists here. So obviously the trick is to find the unique stories, the stories that have not yet been told. I think we all have COVID fatigue. We're really tired of reading about it. We're really tired of hearing about it. People start blending together. And so it's always going to be about finding the unique or the kind of the unexpected consequence. I mean, I think that's more and more what I've been trying to do, is to find things that are COVID adjacent, you know. I would say, just going back to what we just heard from the Secretary, I think one piece that he did not talk about, that I was surprised to not hear a word about, was the role of the food industry in making us fat and unhealthy. And I didn't hear anything from him about incentives or disincentives, you know, either the stick or the carrot, to encourage the food industry to make better food, you know, healthier food. And I do, one qualm I have about the pivot of SNAP and now WIC, there's a pilot program to get WIC online too, to the pivot to online access for all of these assistance programs, is that it makes direct marketing to low-income Americans very easy. And, you know, we know that historically, whether you're talking about tobacco or booze or whatever, there have been kind of, you know, really predatory practices in marketing. And I would love to hear what the Secretary's thoughts are on some of that stuff moving forward, on things like soda taxes, or kind of circumscribing what you can buy with some of these assistance programs.
I mean, is it just a huge kind of incongruity that on one hand they want nutritious food, on the other hand there's all sorts of subsidies going to meat producers and cheese producers and things like that?
Well, sure. I mean, our food assistance or you know, commodity, you know, the way we prop up corn, wheat, et cetera, soy, it means that those foods are really cheap, and they're the building blocks of a lot of the you know, the worst foods that we eat, the kind of, you know, the foods that play to our reptile brains. I think that we really do need to reassess some of the kind of subsidies so that we can kind of focus on remunerating the people who grow the stuff that's good for us. I mean, it's weird to me that fruits and vegetables are specialty crops. You know, it's like, that's what we eat, you know. So I would love to hear. I mean, it's odd to me that SNAP has always been a program where the far left and the far right agree that you can't, you know, there's food sovereignty, you can't circumscribe you can't tell people what they can buy. But WIC tells people precisely what they can buy. And I think as a country, we have to have a bigger conversation about some of those decisions and kind of, you know, the focus on historically, writing about hunger was writing about just lack of food, and now it's really, as the Secretary said, and both, you know, Calvin and Vince have said, it's really a nutrition deficit.
And do you find it difficult to write stories that the public understands that? If are they still hearing hunger as you know, a calorie deficit, and are they coming around to the notion that the issue we're talking about is something different?
I think you're right. I think that there's a huge lag between what the average American understands there. I mean, they think of it as like, you know, what's the issue? You know, just get food in front of people. But if you're really talking about, you know, like the online access in some ways does democratize access, you know, in terms of we've always talked about kind of food swamps and food ghettos and you know, like basically places where there's like a dollar store, you know, and no, you know, everything is shelf stable. And so online access does change that a little bit. And I think that we're at a kind of a real inflection point in terms of getting healthy food into the hands of people who need it. I mean, I even think the food box program, as much as it was fraught with some problems and perhaps a few shysters that I'm sure we'll hear more about as we unpack all of that, I still think that it did manage to get fresh fruit and veg and dairy and meat into the hands of people who needed it pretty swiftly. So I think that, you know, it was a win for the Trump administration for sure.
Okay. So we have some questions coming in specifically for the panelists here, and I have some questions also. This one is for Vince. So this is from Todd Price, who is with the American South part of the USA Today network. Vince, I recently spoke with Edward Lee of the Lee Initiative. He believes that chefs should be seen as first responders in a crisis, and that too many chefs in their kitchens were idle during the pandemic. How do you see meals provided by chefs during a crisis fitting into your mission of addressing food insecurity? Do you see these often ad hoc operations as an efficient use of resources?
Well, thank you. You know, during the opening weeks and months of the COVID pandemic, it was a critical resource because seniors were asked essentially to quarantine in their homes, to shelter in place, as it were, and many of them lost access to congregate feeding sites that they relied on for healthy, balanced, nutritious meals. I am so inspired by the work of Calvin's organization, Meals on Wheels, who have developed an entire business model specifically around getting those prepared healthy meals to seniors in need. And many Meals on Wheels chapters work with Feeding America members to make that possible. My own experience before joining Feeding America as a food banker saw my food bank providing supplemental bags of fresh fruits and vegetables to accompany the Meals on Wheels prepared meals that were being delivered to seniors. So it is very important. You know, another dynamic is that we often are distributing fruits and vegetables that some communities haven't prepared previously. And so we have chefs who will prepare easy to make meal cards, recipes based on the commodities that we're able to source into our food banks to help people to understand how to prepare those into delicious meals, because a lot of the fresh fruits and vegetables that are being distributed are in fact coming to us as surplus crops. And there is less than half of the crops grown in the United States end up going to market for the purpose that they were originally planted. And there are a lot of secondary and tertiary uses for those surplus crops. But frankly, the federal IRS tax code provides a nice incentive to growers, producers, shippers, retailers to distribute those surplus commodities to food banks. And if you were to look at food banks in the 1990s, there was a heavy emphasis on shelf-stable product, which is canned and boxed goods. And if you look at the percentage of food today that is in fact fresh fruits and vegetables, it's remarkable, absolutely stunning, the growth and distribution of fresh fruits and vegetables. And part of that is just the getting the supply chain logistics down, because obviously, as the secretary spoke to quite eloquently, you have to have the storage and distribution capacity for perishable products, which is not something that food banks really enjoyed in the first decades of food banking. But you also have to have a commitment to nutrition. You have to honor the role that fresh produce plays in creating a healthy diet for people dealing with food insecurity. So I can just say from my own experience that chefs have been a critical ally in that struggle, and we continue to look for ways to partner with chefs on prepared meal options that make sense for local communities.
Okay. So I have a couple of questions. I want to hear from both Calvin and Vince on each of these, but try to keep your answers fairly short so we can get some more questions in. This one is first is about finances, the second is about politics. What percentage of the charitable dollar goes toward actual food as opposed to administration of these programs, talking about charitable programs? And what are some of the ways that you are exploring to change that dynamic within poor communities to reduce their need for outside charity? So if you can maybe just answer the first question about, for Feeding America and for Meals on Wheels, how much is administration versus food money going toward the actual food? And then is there a way that you can reduce the need for what it is you're doing by changing the dynamic? So we'll hear from Vince first and then Calvin.
It's a very, very, very high percentage. I don't have it off the top of my head of Feeding America's funding that goes directly into services. There is such a leveraging of volunteer support and volunteer resources that is at the core of Feeding America's ability to do that. 60,000 agency partners across the country who are mainly faith-based organizations and other nonprofit charitable organizations. And if you visit food distribution points at the last mile of Feeding America's system, it is heavily populated with volunteer support. People who show up every week at a certain place at a certain time and do the heavy lifting of preparing the food and distributing the food to communities in need. So we're always striving for increased efficiency. We're always looking for ways to improve the amount of mission fulfillment that we achieve for each dollar spent. And we never have enough. Even before COVID, hunger was an extraordinarily serious and compelling national problem. I would argue that perhaps what COVID has done is to take the Band-Aid off a wound that has been all too easy for us to ignore in previous decades. And I think the challenge for us now is not to return to pre-COVID levels, but to map out a pathway so that the wealthiest country on earth doesn't have a hunger problem, that we make it possible as a partnership between government and the charitable food system to make sure that every American in need has access to the food resources they need to nourish themselves and their families.
Okay, Calvin, same question to you.
So Chris, we track a program service ratio, which basically tracks all of the dollars that go directly into program services, including nutrition, for all those we serve. And our program service ratio is about 86%. We rely mainly on private funding, and those funders require that we maintain a program service ratio of at least 75%. And both of those numbers are relatively high. I think just like Vince, we really rely on a robust core of volunteers who add significant value to our bottom line. We deploy about 3,200 volunteers a year. We estimate that their services basically contribute about $2.5 million worth of goods and services to our clients and to the organization. So an outstanding benefit there. I think we should also talk about our advocacy work around the American Rescue Plan Act. It has tremendous benefits for seniors, and I know that this probably won't get reported on a whole lot or talked about a whole lot past the passage of the bill, but the living wage is an absolute necessity of lifting people out of poverty. And while that impacts people who are working, it's good to remember that most seniors are not working. And once a senior falls into poverty, it is very difficult to lift that senior out of poverty. So we all should have a vested interest in making sure that we get more federally sourced resources down to local programs that help seniors stay out of poverty, help seniors stay in their homes and out of assisted living care facilities.
Okay, it's 1:28. I'm just to the three speakers. Are you able to stick around a few minutes past 1:30 to take some more questions?
Sure.
Okay, so the same question, a different question, but I want to hear both from Calvin and Vince. This is a fairly broad question, but it's getting at the politics of support. How has politics impacted the support for your programs? I mean, in this, what I think the questioner is asking is, in this kind of tense political time, I mean, are people supporting you more or less, or do you have any sense about the political dynamic today?
Chris, I think the need has been so overwhelming, and it's been front and center, not only in our communities, but on our television screens, in our small groups. We understand as a community and know that people are in desperate need. And I think organizations who are working in the space had a stronger indication and knowledge about this prior to COVID. And COVID really laid bare a lot of the systemic inequities that were really plaguing communities. My example, of course, Meals on Wheels of Metro Tulsa really focuses on our senior population, but we are also part of the safety network for the entire community. And so when the entire community is hurting, we level up to find ways to expand our mission and embrace more people in need. And that's what we had to do. And I know programs all across the country are doing the same thing. And so we really focused not only on seniors and on the students that we served, but we also found ways to partner with other local organizations like the YWCA, Tulsa Transit, to make sure that we were serving um, um, immigrant communities, the undocumented, and marginally or underserved communities that historically had been kind of left out of that service profile. And so it's given us an opportunity to kind of reevaluate what we've done in the past, what we need to do in the future in response to these kinds of issues. And then it made us more aware, more connected to folks that we hadn't previously served and what their needs are.
Okay, Vince, fairly quickly, I mean, do you see a connection between the politics of today and support for food programs in general and Feeding America specifically?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I want to amend my previous answer just to add that 99% of Feeding America's in-kind and cash donations go out the door in programs and services, with administration accounting for 1% of that total. The reality is that traditionally hunger has been a bipartisan priority. You know, Senator George McGovern and Senator Bob Dole worked together in the mid-70s to create the Modern Food Stamp Act that we now call SNAP. President Reagan worked with Congress to create the Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program. As has been referenced earlier, President Trump created the food box program that is being discussed by the Secretary and others. So, you know, it is not the case that this needs to be or should be a partisan issue. Hunger is an absolutely debilitating condition. Kids can't learn in school, workers can't perform on the job, seniors can't maintain health. People cannot be expected to thrive and achieve all that their gifts would enable them to achieve if they're dealing with hunger on a fundamental basis. And before you get to other problems that need to be solved, whether it be healthcare, housing, education, you have to solve hunger. And so, you know, really historically, this has been a point of focus for leadership of both parties. And that should be the dynamic going forward, because no matter what people feel about political views on various issues, this is an issue that we all can agree should not exist in our country. We also, by the way, have a significant respect for the federal government's role. The federal government provides 9 meals through the SNAP program alone for every 1 meal that the charitable food system provides. So closing the gap between what's available to Americans in need and what will solve the problem of hunger is going to require a lot of increase on the side of federal nutrition programs, not just more innovative, more expansive work by the charitable food system.
Okay.
And
So,
Chris, I would add, if I can add
sure.
one more point to that, we believe at the network that the federal resources have not really kept pace with what the need really is out there. And I would remind everyone that while our network is serving 2.4 to 3.4 million seniors, there are 9.7 million that are standing in need that we actually need to serve. And so we are robustly in support of the American Rescue Plan Act. And one of the things that plan will do, and it's being debated in the Senate right now, is that it would provide more than 1.4 billion in funding for the Older American Act programs, with 750 million designated specifically for nutrition. And I know the Secretary talked a little bit about the SNAP program. It really would give an extension of about 15% of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program increase through September. It was already passed, but it would extend it through September, and funding improvements and demonstration projects to really expand online purchase of groceries using SNAP benefits. So while we, everyday Americans enjoy the benefit of having Whole Foods deliver their meals to their home, or groceries to their homes, before now, SNAP benefits could not be used on those mobile sites. We think that's a fantastic innovation and something that particularly our seniors need and can benefit from.
Okay, so let me turn back to Lori here for a final question or two. how do you cover this issue in which is it a different issue in urban areas versus rural areas and suburban areas? I mean, how is it possible to cover this thing that's happening in different ways in different populations?
Well, I think that the mythology has been that hunger is an urban issue, you know, and I think a lot of the infrastructure to support people who are food insecure has developed in urban areas. And I think what we've seen in the pandemic is that rural hunger is a huge problem. And that people are more isolated. I think elderly people in rural situations just have fewer resources. So I think that we have to reconceive, especially with kind of the hollowing out of rural America. And, you know, as we've seen, even things like broadband, you know, like we have to really be cognizant of you know, these huge urban areas that build up all of this infrastructure, sometimes to the detriment of the kind of more spread out people. And, you know, whether we're talking about the row crop states or, you know, the Rust Belt or whatever. I mean, there's just, it's the population isn't what it was. And you know, infrastructure to support people is equally kind of feeble.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So for the listeners out there, if you're not following Laura Riley's work in the Washington Post, you certainly should. She's kind of owning the business of food beat. I mean, how did you create that beat? Was that a new thing?
Oh, well, no, I think the Post has had it for a while. I mean, I think more and more, I mean, I see a lot of the names in the chat here are familiar colleagues at different publications. I think that there's never been more interest in our food system. And it's never been more opaque in a lot of ways. I mean, if 2% of Americans have something to do with ag now, you know, that's a lot of us that have barely ever seen a cow. So I think that there's this huge disconnect in our system right now that, you know, we have this kind of insatiable desire to understand the provenance of our food in a system that has more and more kind of twists and turns. And you know, so I think it's, you know, it's a really weird kind of service journalism to write about, to kind of unpack that system, you know,
Right.
But there are more of us doing it.
Okay. And with that, I think we need to draw this to a close. I've kept the speakers a little bit later than we expected, but Vince Hall, Laura Riley, and Calvin Moore, I want to thank you all very much for giving us your time, for listening to Hanging in the Wings, listening to the secretary, and then coming on for a short Q&A. I think we've reached a lot of journalists today. We will have full resources from this program, including a transcript with the secretary and with the panelists, and videos of the secretary and the panelists, as well as all sorts of Feeding America resources, Meals on Wheels resources, USDA resources, and we will have that posted to the nationalpress.org website by tomorrow morning, probably. And I want to thank again Vince and Laura and Calvin for taking the time. And with that, we also check nationalpress.org for our upcoming programs. The next training briefing that we're going to have is dealing with trade and medical supply chain issues. So that's it for today. I want to thank you all once again, and we look forward to seeing everybody online again.